anyone wants to join in, you can. Let's see. Yeah, there's someone anonymous on here for a bit. Okay, well, what are you doing? Okay, well, if anyone tunes in, hello. I can't really see who's watching right now, so I guess I'll get started. There's definitely going to be a delay since we're trying to figure out streaming to both Twitch and Zoom at the same time. It was a process. I'm probably going to switch to YouTube Live next time. But for now, that's why we do these test runs, so that when Wednesday comes, we don't have this issue. So I'm going to be making a red pasta sauce. This is actually something I make pretty often. Any sort of pasta, pizza, or any sort of Italian dish that you want to make. This is not really authentically Italian, but it's something that I've come up on my own since it's probably the easiest thing to make at your home, especially right now since we're all kind of stuck inside. So what you usually need is a can of diced tomatoes. Anything that's basically aroma tomatoes or any kind of tomato you have, you want to make sure that it's canned, since in my opinion, even though fresh tomatoes are really good, they don't come out the same way when you're making your sauce. Usually what I'm doing for this recipe, it's a 28-ounce can, but you can also use two 14.5-ounce cans, and that'll probably be the exact same thing. You're also going to want to make sure, and this is really important, to have tomato paste. You can't do this without tomato paste, or the texture is going to be completely off, and it won't really be like sauce. It's going to be more like a soup. You're going to need onion. I prefer any sort of yellow, white, or Spanish onion, since the flavor goes a lot better. But if you don't have anything like that at home, you can also use a red onion, or some people say this is purple. So you can use anything like that. For any sort of aromatics and stuff like that, on top of that, you're also going to want to have some garlic. So about 2 to 3 cloves, or 1 if you don't like garlic. You can use that as well. The garlic is really good to use. And you're also going to want to have, this is optional, but I usually use this with all of my red sauces. And if you're not 21, I recommend using white grape juice and maybe a little bit of white vinegar. That also works as well. But I always use a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. This is about $3 at Aldi. So it's really cheap, and I use this for my red sauces all the time. And it's really important for this next step we'll have at, towards the middle of making the sauce. Next, you're going to want some herbs. So you can use fresh parsley, so anything like this will work. You can use rosemary if you don't have parsley, or anything else such as basil. That works as well, but you're going to want something aromatic and very strong to pair with it properly. And then it wasn't unmuted. Okay, well, that's fine. That's why we have tests. My cameraman informed me. So also, if you don't have anything fresh, you can use sort of dried herbs as well, since anything dried is going to be very strong. So you also want to make sure that 3 of these is equal the same as about 3 tablespoons of these. Super important to remember that, because if you use 3 tablespoons of this to compare with this, you're going to have a very strong parsley-driven sauce. And if you like parsley, you can do that, but in my opinion, too much will kind of ruin the dish. Lastly, you're going to want some butter. I use salted so that I don't have to add extra salt, since I'm not really a fan of using too much salt. If not, you can also use table salt and use unsalted butter. That works as well. And then on top of that, you're also going to want some pepper to taste, but it's not really required. I like adding that in there. So one more important thing before I start is you're going to want some olive oil. since this is basically a key ingredient when you're sauteing, and I'll get to that right away. So the first thing you want to do is you just want to prepare your ingredients. So I had everything kind of washed but beforehand, but with any sort of onion, what you want to do is you just want to cut it in half. Make sure that you can cut them into thin slices. I usually mince them just to make sure that everything is small, since my family doesn't really enjoy onion. So I usually cut them fairly small. But if not, you can put them into slices, halves, anything, just as long as you get onion in there, since you're going to be sauteing. So make sure you always have that ready. So there you go. So now we have some diced onion. The next thing you're going to want is your tomato paste and diced tomatoes. So again, because I already had the cans ready, you don't really need to worry about that too much. The next thing you want is you just want to get your parsley ready. So what I do is, because they have these stems with the plant, you just want to peel them off. Because even though the stem has a lot of flavor, the texture is kind of off-putting. And so you just want to get enough so that you have some color added in there, and you can save some later to kind of garnish it so it looks kind of nice. So that's it for that. And so for this, you can either, you kind of squish them together so that you have some room, and you're just going to cut it. And when you're smelling it, you'll know that you cut it well, because you're going to start smelling parsley in the air. Okay. So the next thing is you want to make sure that you have a medium-sized to large pot. So it's going to be basically anything. You can use a cast iron pot, stainless steel, aluminum, doesn't matter what kind you have. I prefer using any sort of cast pot, because really I'm just more of a preference for that. But anything works, since this is a pretty mess-free dish. But you want to make sure you have a top for this, because if you don't cover it, it's going to splatter when you start simmering it. All right, camera, what's this? All right, so what you're doing is you're basically going to make sure that you have your pot warming up. So you want to put it on about medium. I have a pretty strong burner, and it's with flame as well. So you just want to make sure that it's about midway through on your pot. Anything that's a delicate pot, always make sure you start low and slowly bring it up. But for now, just keep it on medium and let it start heating up. For the butter, you're going to want to get about 1 to 2 tablespoons. We usually freeze most of the butter, so it basically lasts longer, but you can still cut it, and it's going to be about this big for a tablespoon. So you can just throw that in there. Can they see the top?
Oh, gosh.
So you basically want to make sure you get your butter in there, then just throw a little bit of olive oil. So you have it in there. And the olive oil is basically meant to make sure that the butter doesn't burn while you're heating it up and melting it. So you're just going to keep it on medium while the butter is melting in there. You'll know the pot's hot enough once the butter is completely melted. And then while you're also melting the butter, you could be preparing all of the ingredients on the side if you want to save on time. But any sort of extra things you want to throw in there as well, such as pork sausage, any sort of seafood if you want to make something like that, carrots, you can also throw that in there as well. I recommend preparing that right now, since Italian sausage, you want to make sure that you take the casing off, since you're not going to be able to have whole sausage in there easily. Or bacon, you want to make sure you cut that into little strips, since that's going to cook a little evenly. All right, so now that the butter's completely melted and it's warm enough, you can basically get all of your ingredients, parsley, some of your onion, and just throw that in there. The next thing you want to do is get your garlic. So basically what you do is peel it. I usually use my fingers and I kind of press in. That easily removes it. And so what you do is you just take off this end right here, pull the stem, and then you're just gonna cut it one more time and then crush it. So you just get this, the side of your knife, and then now you have crushed garlic. So you can throw that in there as well. I usually like using 2 or 3 since I'm a huge fan of garlic. I'm gonna be adding a lot in there. We'll do one more. With the wooden spoon, you just want to keep on moving it. Just to coat it in the oil so that everything evenly cooks. Remember to watch the temperature. Even though it's at medium, sometimes it might be too much for the pot and it's going to start sticking too much. But it's okay if you see it browning a bit. That's the whole point. You want them to get translucent. And you basically want to do that for about, I'd say, 5 to 7 minutes. While this is going on, you want to add some salt and pepper to it. So again, I'm not going to really add salt since I'm not much of a fan for it, but you can also add some pepper. Also, if you have your rosemary, don't cut it, don't do anything with it, just throw it in there. All right, so we're just going to let this cook for a little bit. If you see it getting too dry in there, throw an extra bit of olive oil or butter, your preference, and that's just to make sure nothing burns. It's going to look like that. And you'll start smelling it too. It smells really aromatic. The more herbs you throw in there, the more you're going to smell it, and people are really going to enjoy that in your house if you do that. All right. Are you fixing it?
Oh, I'm trying to fix it.
Looks like it's going through. All right, so now that it's cooked through and all the onion is translucent, you can take the rosemary out. You can save that for later, maybe chop it up if you want to throw it as garnish. Mix it one more time just to make sure everything is coated again. And this is when you start using the wine. So You just want to use a splash. It's really up to taste. I like using a lot, but the whole point is you want to make sure you put a bit, mix it in a bit. And what that does is it deglazes the pan. So it's actually going to remove all of the oil that was on the sides of the pan. So everything kind of collects.
I'm going to restart it.
Now that you have that, you can add your diced tomatoes. More to put in. And get your tomato paste. I just use a spoon to get this out, but if you have a small spatula, that also works as well. And you want to get as much of it as you can. The more tomato paste you use, the thicker your sauce is going to become. You want to do this as fast as possible once you put the tomato paste in, because this will start splattering when it's boiling. Just mix it in a bit so that everything is thoroughly mixed. If you want a sauce that's less chunky, when you're done simmering this, I recommend throwing it into a blender and pulsing it for a bit, or just blending the entire thing together. I might do that later on, since I'm going to be doing pizza on Wednesday, so that people will see what you can use the sauce for. But if not, you can serve it as is, and it'll be pretty chunky. All right, so it's gonna look like this. Basically sauce. At this point, what you can do is you can throw in any additional ingredients that I didn't mention. So that would be sugar. Sugar is pretty good because if you add a little teaspoon of sugar, it's gonna bring out the tomatoes a lot more than they could. So you're just gonna sprinkle a little bit of sugar in there and mix it in. If you want as well, you can throw in some red pepper flakes, and that's gonna be this. And that just adds a little bit of kick to the, sorry about the delay, my camera just ran out of battery. We're gonna have to find a way to fix that. So now that you actually threw in all of your diced tomatoes and your tomato paste, and I recommend doing that as fast as you can, because as you can see, it is now popping. So to make sure you don't have a mess all over your kitchen, just put a top over it, bring the temperature to low, and you're basically going to make sure that you have this well simmered for, I recommend about 30 minutes, but you can do it in about 5 minutes if you're in a rush, or you can do it for the entire day. The more you let it simmer, the better the flavor is going to be. And at the same time, you can also start preparing your pizza, your pasta, anything that you have at home. I usually like using this on pizza, especially if I blend it, because it's just going to be a very flavorful sauce that goes well with the dough. And then at the same time, you can also start preparing any garnishes. So any of that parsley or rosemary you saved from before, you can cut that right now. And it's the same process we did at the beginning. Just get that ready so you can throw it in the sauce. So I can show that right now, actually. So with all this rosemary, you can just throw it back into the pot. If you have any cheese as well, such as sort of Romano, so you just got this from Costco, you can basically get a handful of this and sprinkle it into the pot. Again, anything you do at the pot, you want to do it as quickly as possible, because when you keep the top off, what's going to happen is all of the moisture is going to be evaporating out, and you don't want that to happen since we already thickened the sauce with tomato paste. All right, that's how you have it. For Wednesday, what I'm gonna have doing is a pizza recipe. So I'm just gonna show how to make the dough for pizza, as well as how to kind of roll it out and kind of put toppings on there. I'm gonna be using the same stuff that I made here, just a little fresher, but I'll have that going. As well, for a word of caution for the pizza, it does require, or I recommend having it rising overnight in the fridge if you have a fridge with you. But you basically just want to make sure that you get all the things ready, since pizza kind of takes a bit longer. And I'll have some made in advance for that as well. So if you have any questions, you can send me an email at the SimpleCookingStream@gmail.com, or just send me a message on Twitch or Zoom. That works as well. But yeah, so any sort of questions that you have or anything that you want to follow up with me on, go ahead and give me a contact and I'll be sure to do that. So thanks.